Всем привет. В первую очередь
Hi,
большое спасибо
everyone.
за возможность
First of all, thank you to Maxime for this opportunity to finally talk about Community Manager at this event at White Nights Conference. It gives me immense pleasure to talk with you, and I hope we are going to have a nice and fruitful conversation.
Когда мы обсуждали о том, о чем бы рассказать на конференции, поднялся вопрос о
When I was
токсичности.
preparing for this
И если
conference, I
Серега
was actually thinking about what can I talk about with these people.
употребил слово лояльность, то
And
давай
we
скажем
actually
токсичность,
thought that
чтобы
we could
это
speak
было
about
звучит
toxic
гораздо
communities.
ближе
And if the
к
previous
правильному
speaker talked a lot about
географическому
loyalty,
определению. Так вот,
we're going to
токсичность
speak about
сообщества.
toxicity. So,
В
what are toxic
работе
communities?
с интернет-проектом,
When
наверное,
you
не
work with an
существует
internet
дня
project,
у
you
комьюнити
cannot survive
менеджера,
a
чтобы он
day
не
if you are a
столкнулся
community
с
manager
токсичностью.
without a toxic
Об этом
comment.
говорят все.
Everyone
На
talks
самом
about it.
центре
At
собеседований, на которых я был
100%
с одной
of
или с другой
interviews,
стороны,
and
всегда
I've been on
возникает
both sides,
вопрос,
believe me,
как вы работаете с
a
негативом,
question
что
comes
вы
up.
делаете с троллями,
What do you do with trolls?
как
How do you
поступили
work with
с
toxic communities?
возможностью отработать токсичность.
How do you actually address this negative and toxic
Но,
feedback?
а что такое токсичность? Что
But
такое
what is
токсичное
toxicity in the
сообщество?
first place?
Откуда они
What are toxic
берутся?
communities? Where
Что
do they
им,
come
как с ними
from?
жить и
How do you
вообще,
work
что
with
с ними
them?
делать, и самое главное, нужно ли с
How
ними
do you
что-то
engage
делать.
with them, and do you even have to? Or you can simply ignore them.
Во время подготовки к сегодняшнему выступлению
When I
я
was preparing for my
много
presentation today,
пытался про себя
I was trying to actually
понять, как
think
я
and
воспринимаю
understand how I
токсичность
understand
в
toxicity,
голове.
what toxic
Является
communities are,
одно агрессивное действие
whether
токсичным
one
или нет,
simple aggressive
или
comment
по-другому.
toxic or is
И
it not.
вводил, ну, не то что определение, а в рамках
And I tried
интернет-проекта
to,
мы открыли,
come up with a
что
definition
токсичность–
in the framework of
это
a game
эмоциональная
to give a
нападка
definition for
словом или действием,
a
которая не
toxic
несет
comment. So
никакого
toxicity to me
конструктивного
is an emotional attack
смысла,
by word or action
идеи,
caused by
и вызванная
dissatisfaction
внутренним
without
усилием
any
расстройства.
rational kernel. It is
А,
caused by some inner
Пытаясь
aggression, some
понять
inner
такие примеры
dissatisfaction.
токсичного поведения, я много
When I was looking for
посетил
examples of
компьютерных
toxic
игр.
behavior,
Больше всего
I
мне
looked through a lot of
понравилась Ева.
forums,
Первый
and
историк, который я
Eva, the
открыл,
best one that I
нашел там
enjoyed,
первое же сообщение о
the
том, что моя
first
программа опять все испортила.
the first message that
15
I
игре,
actually
приносит
found
большие деньги, все
was
хорошо.
that
Вот первое же
fuck those
сообщение
guys, fuck those developers. What they
только
actually
вчера
did, they
опять,
ruined the game again.
опять
The
все
game has existed for
гибнет и
15
испортилось.
years.
Так
It's
что
super
общего между
successful,
всеми
but then we still see
токсичными
the comments
играми,
that, oh, they
если
screwed
брать
up
по Еву
again and they let us down again. So, what's
определению
happening here?
обсуждения, что их объединяет?
So, what actually brings together those toxic people,
Пользователи
toxic
обязательно
players?
стараются выплеснуть пар.
What these players try to
Может быть,
do is to let
он
off
читает
steam.
патч-ноут, ему что-то не
They log in the
нравится,
games, they
он
read the patch
рассказывает,
note, they don't
кто на
like
самом деле
something,
геймдизайнеры, как это
and they go
поступить.
online and
Он
they
тогда
leave
расскажет,
toxic
что
comments.
его тиммейт сделал что-то не так, как
Or, for
хотелось бы
example,
ему. Он
they
ничего
log
не
in the
может с этим
game, their
сделать.
teammate does
Он
something
не имеет
unexpected,
возможности в
something they don't
управлении
like, they
ситуацией. И
can't
он
manage or
рассказывает свою
control this
историю,
situation,
что с его
and what
мамой.
do? They again go online and they leave a toxic
Никогда
comment.
это не несет
This is
конструктивной
never
цели.
constructive. This is
Человек
never
просто
helpful.
выплескивает
This
пар.
isn't something that
Если кто-то
people
рассказывает
it's not that they
красивых
try to
фразах
help
о
you. This is
том, чем бы вам
only
следовало
because
заняться
people try
в
to
следующие
let off
полчаса, и это
steam.
поможет вам действительно улучшить ваш скилл,
If these people actually
это не
try to give
токсичность,
them
это просто
you negative
агрессивный и
feedback with
неприятный
some
момент
constructive
человека, и это
comments,
действительно ценный
saying
совет.
that you could improve this or you can improve
И это
that,
на самом
even
деле
if they
такой
don't
момент,
try to
который
use a nice
нужно
vocabulary with
запомнить.
that,
Все,
it's
что я
still,
буду
it's
говорить
not
дальше,
toxic.
не
It means
имеет
it's okay,
отношения к
it's a bit
интеллигентным
aggressive, but
людям.
this is
Это
constructive
имеет
feedback.
отношение только к токсичным людям, которые никогда не
But this is
позволят
not what
вам
we are
сделать
talking
что-то
about. We're
лучше.
talking about
Это не
toxic
какой-то
players, people
фидбэк,
who
это
do not
именно
help you improve the
бессмысленное,
game. This is not
беспощадное и
feedback. This is
ненужное
merciless,
действие, другими
senseless,
словами.
useless toxicity that
Кто
we're
может
talking
быть
about.
токсичным?
Who can be toxic? What players can be
Ваш
toxic?
тиммейт,
Your
ваш
teammates,
оппонент,
your
например,
opponents,
парень из вашего клана. И вот
your,
я сидел и думал,
I don't know,
ну-ка,
clan
где,
member,
какие
mate.
примеры токсичности я могу встретить в игре? А
I was
токсичность
trying to
существовала
realize
задолго
where
до
in the
появления
game we
интернета.
can actually find
Когда вы
toxicity.
проходите
But what I realized was that
мимо
toxicity
подъезда из
actually
Сбербанки, и они вам
existed before,
рассказывают
long before
всю
games appeared or the
кроваву,
internet appears. For
кто
example,
это
you
точно
walk in
такое
the
же
street
проявление
and there are some,
токсичности, как
crazy
и
guys that
парень
are talking
на
behind your back and
Твиттере,
saying, oh, look at
который
him, this
только
stupid
что
person, or something
в
like this.
очередной раз
Or say on Twitter,
рассказал,
the
почему
same
все,
thing
что вы делаете в своей
happens.
жизни, это неправильно, и
right? Trolls exist everywhere. It's not about games, it's about people. Toxic people
В
exist
какой-то момент
both
я
offline and
понял,
online.
что токсичность, она вообще везде.
So at some point I understood that it's
Моя трехлетняя дочь
omnipresent.
Алиса
My
не
3-year-old
хотела
daughter,
идти
her name
гулять.
is Alisa.
И я пытался ее подкупить.
She
Говорю,
didn't want to
Алиса,
go for a walk,
пойдем
so I
в
decided to
шарик,
bribe
пойдем
her.
выгуливать шарик.
I gave her a
Она
ball and
запустила
I
мне его
said
в
that we
лицо,
need to walk
и
this ball. So what
что
she
это
did instead, she
токсичное
threw this in
поведение?
my
У
face.
ребенка нет возможности повлиять на ситуацию.
And I
Она
thought it was
хочет
toxic
выгулять в
behavior.
парк.
She cannot
И
control the
ей
situation.
7
She
рублей, она
wants to
уже
let her
токсичная.
steam
То есть
off.
я 10
She's
лет
3-year-old and
работаю
she's
на тех
already
двух бороться с
toxic. What's
такими людьми, и
happening?
самого другого из них
I've been
воспитал.
trying to fight these people for 10 years now within the
И
company
самое
and
главное,
actually brought
что
up a toxic
токсичен каждый из
daughter.
нас.
You see, it's,
Мне
well,
когда пришла эта мысль в голову,
it's
я решил,
everywhere. So
что
what I
вот
realized
точно, я
is that
сейчас
we
наконец-то
all
впилю свою
are
первую пост в
toxic.
LinkedIn. И
And this is
потом
when
я
I
пошел
thought
такой
maybe I
цвет,
should, write a whole article and, say that I did some research and I realized that I am toxic, you are toxic, we all are toxic. But I decided not to because otherwise this will breed even more toxicity online.
Но
We are all
есть
toxic,
и
let's face
хорошие
it, it's not
моменты.
good. We know it, let's
Каждый
admit it.
токсичен время от
But on the
времени.
other hand, what's good
Нельзя
about
быть на
it, that we're
100%
not 100% toxic or we're not
можно, конечно,
100% toxic
но
all the
просто
time.
обычно
Well,
тогда
some
не
people are,
будут
okay,
воспринимать
but
в любом
these are just
сообществе
exceptions,
всерьез и
which can
хорошо.
be actually a
Все мы
good news.
токсичны, все мы
But
иногда
we're all
должны
sometimes
пройти через вот
toxic.
эту внутреннюю
Sometimes
эмоциональную
we go through
сублимацию
this
и выплеснуть в
personal,
лицо
emotional
какому-то
breakdown.
собеседнику все, что мы
And at this
думаем, на
point, we
самом деле
cannot
думаем.
control
Просто
some of
хотим
our
выплеснуть,
emotions.
просто
This is why we
излить.
just let them off
Так
and let off
вредна
steam.
ли токсичность?
So, is it that bad then, if we all have
И
it?
почему она вредна?
If it is, then why is it bad for us?
Когда вы работаете с
So, in the
интернет-проектом,
first place, you have to
токсичность
understand
мешает
whenever you
вам
work with an internet
получить
product,
информацию,
toxicity
по-настоящему
stands in the
ценную
way of
информацию.
getting real feedback, of getting
За
productive, constructive feedback.
тысячами людей, которые с
So, you have
удовольствием играют в
50,000
вашу
people,
игру,
50,000 players of your game.
пытаясь собрать их мнение,
If you want
вы
to collect
получите
some
сообщение
feedback
от
from
100
them,
человек,
you're going to receive,
которые
say,
заблудили абсолютно все
100
площадки, потому что все,
messages
что вы делаете,
from
это
people,
неправильно.
the trolls, who actually
И
flooded all of
если
your
с
feedback
токсичностью
platforms and all of the
побороться,
channels.
то за ней вы
And this way,
сможете
you can actually
найти
receive
те
just some
самые
rubbish
мнения,
and you
те
do not get
самый
some
фидбэк,
good feedback from the people.
который поможет
So
вам
you have
сделать
to actually
лучше.
try and navigate your way through this
И,
rubbish
на мой
somehow.
взгляд, это самая большая проблема
And this, to me, is the
токсичных
biggest
сообществ.
challenge of toxic communities.
Они перекрывают
They
информационный
block the
утиль в
information.
общении.
There is a lot of
Новички,
informational
встречая
rubbish in this
токсичное
environment,
поведение
in this
оппонентов
ecosystem.
или сокомандников,
And they all stand in the way of
не
good,
становятся
productive
более умелыми
feedback.
игроками. Они
Just because a
ловят
toxic
негатив
player wrote
и
something bad online,
вряд ли в следующий раз
this is
зададут
not going to
вопрос
help
о
the
том,
developers,
что
or this is
игрок
not going
сделал.
to help the players. This doesn't contribute to
Токсичность
anyone's
разрушит
efforts.
социальные связи.
Furthermore,
Люди
toxicity
уходят из
breaks down
токсичных кланов, а
social
уходя из клана, зачастую
social
уходят из
interaction.
игры.
Sometimes people have to
Они
leave
не
clans because they
заводят
can't
новых
bear this
друзей
toxicity
там,
any
где могли
longer.
бы их завести.
Or sometimes when they leave the clan, they leave the game,
Это важный очень
the game
элемент,
itself,
потому что ничто так
which
не
is awful.
задержит игрока у вас в проекте,
And this has to be fought somehow,
некоторое количество сетевых друзей, которых он
because whenever
получил
people
и
face
довел.
these toxic comments,
Плохой
they're going to
пользовательский
leave
опыт.
games. This generates bad
20
user
дизайнеров,
experience.
80 программистов,
So
разрабатывали
imagine you have a
фичу,
huge
вложили
team,
сотни человека часов
hundreds
для
of
того,
people,
чтобы
designers, developers.
человек пришел, поиграл,
They
получил
contributed so
удовольствие
much
или
of their time and
испытал
effort
азарт,
into a feature. They wanted the person to have fun, well,
но
to pay for this feature in the
проект
first place. They
и
want
все эти
everyone to
усилия
be
вдруг
happy.
остановят.
But then a troll comes in
И это не
and
имеет
distracts it all,
никакой конструктивной
just bringing some
объяснения.
negativity and toxicity into this environment without bringing in
Токсичность,
anything
она
productive or anything
вызывает
constructive.
абсолютно нормальная, очевидная и правильная
So it's only
реакция любого
logical, it's
человека,
only obvious
когда ему
that people
рассказывают
will
какие-то
react to
неприятные
some negative and, toxic comments, unfair comments.
вещи, он
What they actually do,
нормальная
how they
реакция
actually
ответить
react,
делает.
is
Соответственно, вместо
talking
одного
back.
неприятного
So say,
тролля
instead
мы
of
имеем
one
двух.
negative comment and one troll, you have two
А,
comments
как
and two
правильно
trolls.
сказал Сергей, через
So
2
trolls
года
breed
их
more
будет
trolls.
уже 700.
And in 2 years, you're going to have 1,000 of them, maybe
Однажды
more.
я столкнулся с пользователем, у которого было очень много свободного времени.
One day, I came across a user who had a lot of free time. Some free time that he actually couldn't make good use of it. So I spent a couple of weeks in trying to convince him not to ruin all of our communication channels. I don't know who this person was. Maybe he was a bit out of his mind. Maybe he was a bit, he had too much free time. But what he did was actually he came to our forums every day. He texted there. He posted, hundreds and hundreds of messages in multiple channels. He emailed even our developers, which was, of course, destructive for us. We have about 1 million players in our game. But what he did, he just on his own, he created so much hardship for us that this had to be controlled. You ban his profile, but he has 5 more. It's a free-to-play game. You don't need your passport, so you can create as many profiles as you want. This is what he did. He provoked other users, and our platforms, they become such a mess. And then what he did, we actually blocked him all through, all the way down to his, to his IP. So we actually, that's the way we did it. And this is how we got rid of him. But it was a lot, we had to spend a lot of effort. And can you imagine just one person who actually had to be addressed by 8 more people? Well, this is just unacceptable. And this is why we have to fight toxicity. So this is no longer a question of whether you should fight it or not. Of course, you have to fight toxicity. This is something that destroys all of your communities. Following up on what I just said, some bad product solutions that, for example, were made because you listened to this unconstructive feedback from trolls, this can ruin your game. I know a couple of examples when great projects had to actually close down because managers believed what trolls said. This is just sad. This is pathetic because, the projects actually had to close. They had to finish their efforts. This is why, if you have a chance, and if you have efforts and you have necessary capacities, okay, you can, of course, analyze this information coming from trolls. But believe me, most of the time it's going to be totally useless. And finally, because of this toxicity, you will potentially have a decrease of MAU. Because new players, they are actually going to be, intimidated by these trolls. Older players, more experienced ones, are going to get bored at some point, and maybe they will join the dark side, let's say, and this way you will multiply these toxic community members. So what do we do with all of that? That's the question. So I started when looking for this solution. I tried to break toxicity into 2 different avenues, into 2 different types. So the first type is toxicity aimed at other players, at fellow players. And sometimes it's not that prominent for you as the developer because, people, have arguments between themselves, like, what do you have to do with this? Well, okay, that's fine. You're not going to try and solve all of these disputes online, you as the developer, I mean. But another option, the other type of toxicity is toxicity from players to developers. Well, this is something personal. This is something super hurtful. Because whenever developers check out forums, they can actually read so much information which is toxic and negative about themselves that their lives are never going to be the same. So what do we do with this? Addressing the first type of toxicity from players to other players. So what do? You can actually work with in-game channels. These in-game channels are under your complete control. Chats, voice communication, voice interaction. So what you need to do is just to stick to a small set of rules. Use tools to limit the, let's call it freedom online, or let's say to limit their opportunity to be toxic. What I mean is, it's okay if users complain about one another, it's fine. But make sure they're not toxic. If they are toxic, ban them. Add them to the blacklist. That's it. I, as a person, I, as a player who has played the, say, a game for a whole time, I think that just giving me, as a player, the opportunity to interact with other players just using emojis, that's what solves all the problems, because I cannot actually write down text. I can only use emojis. But you know, this didn't help because there was no number limitation. You could use as many smiles, as many emojis as you wanted in a second, for example. This is why people just flooded chats with emojis. So it was useless too. Another option could be just to ban communication overall. So what players have to say to one another anyway, right? But of course this is extreme. Okay, what else can you do? What if this communication happens outside of your community, say on Reddit? What can you do? You can this way, or rather in this situation, develop your volunteering groups. And you have to work a little closer with the community. Contribute your effort to the volunteering, because your volunteers provide for 70% of your success. The rest is you, of course. Another one, another community you have to work with is a sub-community, the clans, right? So what you never have to do, and you should never do, is just to try to interact with the clans and let them play by your rules, say, because they have their own inside of the clan rules. And if they want to choose this type of language, for example, a toxic type of language, this is totally fine, because it is their own, these are their own rules. And they play by these rules, and you are an alien in this community. But of course, what if one clanner promised another clan member, for example, and stab him somewhere at night? Well, of course, this is just merely illegal. This has to be, banned, and this has to be, reported even to the police, because this is outside of your competence. However, what happens with the in-game communication, this is totally fine. Just leave them alone. They're going to find their way around by themselves. Let's move on to the second type of toxicity. Toxicity from players to developers. Well, this is something interesting here. So whenever I talk to community managers, every time I hear the same question: how do you actually manage toxic comments? How do you manage toxicity? We all have our own methods. There is no silver bullet here. What I suggest we do is we, brainstorm a little now. Toxicity that is aimed at developers, it normally happens in every game. And it happens when A, you release something, right? When you change the rules of the game. B, when the users come across some technical hardships, some difficulties. When you release an update, some latent users are going to be very unhappy because, well, they're latent, they're not too active, and they don't want you to change anything. And here you are coming up with some updates, and they're annoyed. What you need to do is you have to talk to them. You have to communicate the reason why you update things. You have to be honest. You have to let them know why you actually want to change something, why it is going to benefit them, and why it is going to improve their game experience. Other negative feedback and other toxic feedback comes from active players who actually require changes. They believe they're way more talented game designers than you are, and they believe that you are fools. But what do you do here? You just accept it. You just put up with it. What it means that they actually care about the game. That's it. No matter what happens, they're going to stay in the game, because look at their level of emotions. They're so expressive, and it means they do care about the game. Just let them know that you share their concerns, that you care about their opinions, that you acknowledge their presence, but don't take it too close to heart. Because at some point of time in the life of any internet product, this moment of euphoria comes to the end. And this moment of euphoria becomes broken into multiple parts. Because once you update the game, for example, a small group is going to be happy, another group is not going to be happy. You change something else, and it all changes again, and some people are going to be happy all the time. This is just life. You cannot please all of your players. This is just impossible. Accept it. And finally, the next group is users who have been in the game for so long. They have played for so long. They know it just as the palm of their hand, and they know it even better than you do. They have 18,000 battles in a year, for example. They know everything about this game. They have used all the content and they have seen all the content in the game. And you introduce some updates. At this point, you become the worst enemy because they say, well, the game used to be fun and you spoiled it, you screwed everything again. Well, sorry, that's it. Of course, you know you didn't spoil anything, you didn't screw anything, but they want to have the same emotions that they used to have before the updates. And this euphoria, you know, it's just over. That's it. And the players are not going to have the same feelings about the same game again. And they will never understand that this is your fault. And this is not about even updates. This is just because this, you know, honeymoon is over. And this third category of users is actually pretty sophisticated. What you have to do, you have to point them out, single them out, because this is a priceless community for you. These people are ready to play the game for hours on end. And these people, by sharing their opinions with you, they actually are ready to generate a lot of nice ideas, a lot of content. And they care about the game. They are ready to make a contribution. You can share some insights with these people to make them even happier. You can acknowledge their effort. You can let them know that they are special. This way, you're probably going to be more or less, you're going to make them more or less happy. Whenever necessary, create volunteering groups for very specific trolls, for very specific toxic users. If these toxic users are seriously, they have great expertise in anything, let it be in-game mechanics, let it be the language the game is written in, anything. If they have this expertise that you don't, okay, why not? Why not? Let them share this A, B, give them patch note before you actually release it. Of course, it's not going to be, sharing your trade secret. No, you can just let them know a little earlier about these patches, and this way you're going to earn their trust. Or even meet them offline. These people are ready to come wherever you are. For example, if you let them know that there is something you want to discuss, something that you want their opinion about, something that, where their expertise could be useful, these people will do their best to arrive to your city where you are, meet them for a couple of beers. And you will see that this is just a fellow human being in front of you. And they will also see that you are a human being, that you love your job, that you're trying to make the game even better. And you will see an eye to eye, because your ultimate goal for both of you is to make the game even better. And trying to engage these people more, trying to say that you acknowledge their opinions, this is going to make them happy. And finally, and most importantly, without the product, you will have no community. Don't let trolls and don't let their toxic opinions be that important for your product. First, you have to rely on KPIs and other metrics. Then, listen to feedback. Because again, I reiterate, without the product, you're not going to have any feedback. So whenever you're thinking how to develop your game further, how to improve it, and so on and so forth, and if you have 5 different options, for example, of improving, yes, of course, choose the option that is going to make your community happy, and try to make them feel that it was them who actually influenced your decision-making. And on the very final note, believe in yourself. At this point, I thank you for your attention. It was a blast for me to talk to you today.
И на
Thanks.
правах рекламы я бы хотел сказать, что
And I would also like to say something
мы
here
сколько-то
to
месяцев
advertise.
назад
Say, a couple
организовали
of months ago,
чат в
we
Телеграме,
organized a
крайне
Telegram
токсичный
chat.
чат
It's a very
русскоговорящих
toxic
комьюнити-менеджеров,
chat for
игровых.
Russian-speaking
Пишите
community
лично мне,
managers.
Максу,
Join it.
добавляйтесь там,
Also,
чтобы
you
познакомиться,
can
просто экспертизу
email me, you can direct
русскоговорящих
message me, and
комьюнити-менеджеров.
please join
И
our
можно ругаться матом.
Telegram channel
Спасибо
where
большое.
you are free to use
Первый
obscene
второй спикер,
vocabulary.
который
So,
может задать
thank you.
вопрос по времени.
Great, we still have a couple of minutes and we have a couple of questions here.
Да, это был не вопрос. У кого есть вопросы к Сергею?
Who has questions?
Сережа, привет, спасибо за доклад.
Hi, Sergey. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Посоветуй, пожалуйста, что нужно делать с
Could you recommend what you can actually do with toxicity? How do you deal with it when you release a new product?
Формировать ядро, самому собирать
You need,
и растить инфлюенсеров.
what you need to do is you need to actually create this core audience. You need to breed influencers. You need to put your effort into creating your core audience. Initiate dialogues, communicate with these people, meet them offline, meet them at their platforms, for example.
Карточную клиентку юбисофтовскую.
So once I created a card game for Ubisoft, and what I actually did, I created a profile at poker website, and I had to learn to play the game because this was my target audience, and this was the way I tried to drive in more people into my game. Try to be friendly with them. Try to find the most active players. They are going to be the core of your audiences. For years on end, they are going to be super useful to you. Hi, Sergey. Thanks for your presentation.
Вопрос, а что если токсичный сам opinion leader? То есть
What if toxicity comes from the opinion leader themselves? Well, it means you should try harder to become friends with them, because you can become friends with anyone. There are books that actually recommend different tricks and tips for becoming friends with people. So what you need to do is to try to understand what you have in common. You have to try to see eye to eye. I'm sure that all of the people who come to offline meetings with you, who come there for a couple of beers with you, and who would, right in your face telling your shitty stuff, of course not. You're going to become friends. Just try to meet offline then. Another question. Should you encourage toxicity? What if you have a balance and some balance that you want to adjust? So, for example, if some people lose some in-game currency, for example, and they lose it, do you have to recover this currency to get rid of toxicity? Well, it depends. You need to research every particular case, I think. But if you encourage these toxic people, you're going to breed them even more. Correct me if I'm wrong. Well, in your decision-making, you have to understand how important it is for your core community. To give you an example, just earlier this year, we fully changed the balance in our World of Warships game. So we made some drastic changes. And what we did, when people were not happy, we recovered 100% of their hard currencies. And these people were actually to see this much currency on their accounts. And you see, it generated even more money for them. So it's okay, why not give them in-game currency?